Hey there, fellow Sigma FP users. In this video, I wanted to share a couple of LUTs that I just got done making, and also just take a look at the off-profile all-eye MOV footage that you can shoot on this camera. I know that pretty much everybody using this camera is shooting in the CDNG RAW format that I love, that we all love. But I had an instance where I wanted to make the camera as light as possible, like to use it on a gimbal, and my SD card was not fast enough to be able to write 4K CDNG footage. And so I just started playing around with the off profile and the MOV formats that we have available on this camera that everybody pretty much just ignores. But I wanted to see and just test how good they are. Are they usable? Because the space saving is truly immense. You know, in addition to potentially just wanting to use an SD card to capture footage, I can think of other good reasons, right? For example, what if someone wants you to record like a conference that's 7 hours long or something like that, and they want to record every single lecture, and maybe you don't have enough SSDs in order to record that whole thing in CDNG. So that's why I decided to make this LUT pack and just kind of experiment around, is so that if for some reason you did have to record some off-profile MOV footage to save space, and you might want to use that in conjunction with the CDNG footage that you already have, that is what these LUTs are going to help you do. I think you might be impressed, or maybe not, by how good and at least how pretty darn close these profiles can get the color science to look. So let's just jump right in, and let's take a look at the website that I set up here. So this is kind of a follow-up video to one I made a couple years ago where I used some LUTs in order to recreate the internal color profiles that are on this camera, including the warm gold profile and all those other ones, and turn your CDNG footage into matching those internal profiles, if you wanted to do that. Since then, I have pretty much redone my entire system of how I really am handling the CDNG footage and how I'm kind of getting that to a final product. So I'll go over that a little bit today as well. But anyway, at the bottom of this page, I've made an update. You can find this if you just search my name, Richard Pence, and then Sigma FP LUT. You can find it. You can find this webpage right there. And then it'll of course be linked in this in the description of this video, so you can find it like that. So here on the update part, you will find the LUTs here. You can just click on those words. It will open up and you can download the zip file. It's really tiny because it's just 3 little cube LUTs in there. And if you think I did a terrible job with all my color grading and you think you could do a lot better, I have included the sample footage that I used. So you can click on this one down here. It'll take you to a Google Drive. If you want to download everything that I used, there's a zip file here. It's about 10 gigabytes. But then I also have the footage itself at multiple ISOs, as well as multiple exposure styles that you can do with the CDNG footage that I'm going to go over. But you can view or just download and give a shot on your own to doing any of this color grading that I did. So if you feel like it, those are there. And also people ask pretty often for just a sample of the CDNG footage. Since it's so big, I only included like a second or so, I don't know, like 15, 20 frames for each CDNG folder. But that's enough for you to download and take a look at the dynamic range and do any stuff like that. So if anyone needs or wants to share these as just sample for CDNG footage, feel free to do so. All right, so assuming you've downloaded everything, there's going to be basically 2 things. And the main thing that you want to download here are going to be the LUTs. So those are our LUTs there. And then I also have the sample footage here separated out. So let's just open up DaVinci Resolve. And then here in our main starting kind of screen, I've already input all of those sample footages that I shot. So we'll take a look at those in a second. But first, let's just take a look at loading your LUTs here into DaVinci Resolve. So here in Resolve, let's go down to the little cog wheel in the bottom right. That's going to be your settings. And then in settings, you want to find color management. So you can click on that. And then in the lookup tables, which is what LUT stands for, you want to click on Open LUT Folder. So here in the LUT folder, you will find all kinds of things. You might not have a Sigma folder. I ended up making that. So if you don't have one, you can just press New Folder here, and you can make a new folder. So if you just press New Folder, you can make one. Click on that. And I've made a few, right? So here's those internal profiles I had looked at. And then I have a new one, which is off to CDNG. And then here actually is my some of my precursor and trial ones. But let's just make a new one. So I'll hit Control-Shift-N for a new folder, and I'll say final off to CDNG. Cool. So I can click on that, and then I can pull up whatever folder I have my my LUTs in. So these would have come from that file that I downloaded and unzipped. And then you can just take these and you can drag them into that final CDNG folder. So once they are in there, and you can also double check that the path is Blackmagic Design, DaVinci Resolve, Support, LUT, and then your folders that you made. So those are in there. All you have to do is click Update List and then Save. And now those LUTs will appear when we're working on the footage. So let's just take a look. Here, I've already organized everything on the timeline so that we can see the DNG footage first, and then we can see the all-I MOV. So the first thing that I want to talk about is actually the two different ways that you can expose your CDNG footage. So this first one here, these ones are both shot at ISO 100. So they're matching. The settings were exactly the same for both of them. I have some footage of the actual camera itself for this shot in particular. And so for these first ones at ISO 100, everything was just matching using a custom white balance. At ISO 100, if you know a little bit about exposure on the Sigma FP, you'll know that at ISO 100, there is no extra headroom for your highlights. Your highlights are pretty much just going to be blown as much as they would be in the MOV. So what you see on the screen is what you're going to get. And what you see on the false color is what you're going to get in that instance. But moving up into the other ISOs, and I chose ISO 800, you get a lot more headroom, meaning that if you were to actually turn on the false color, which I'll show you in a second, you can very, very much overexpose what you're seeing on the screen. So what you actually see on the screen is not at all representative of what the colors in the false color are actually going to record to your CDNG. So ultimately, you can overexpose what you see on the screen in order to maximize your recording on the CDNG. So in these final two, what I have, the very first one here, so this first DNG, this one is ISO 800, but the exposure is matched. So it is the exact same exposure that was recorded on the MOV footage, the off all-I footage. And then the other one here, the DNG, this one is the overexposed one. So it's still ISO 800, still 180 degree shutter, but it is overexposed. at least as it appears on the viewfinder. But I held down the false color button, and then I overexposed the footage and kept on cranking up the exposure until I was just barely getting peaking, right? So I was just barely seeing that yellow-red highlight overexposure warning, and then I recorded my footage like that. So now that we've covered that, I'm just going to go over the basic process that I go through for pretty much all of my FP footage. So we can even start back here. So on this DNG here, the main thing that I do now is I go down to the camera raw tab, and I of course switch it from project to clip. And then yours might not look exactly like mine. The only preset I've kind of added in here is lowering the highlights by -100. And I think this is pretty common amongst other FP users. And then I also have chosen to add the sharpness to 49, but we don't have to do that. We can just stick to the standard of 10. So other than that initial kind of thing, the next thing I'll do is I'll add my CST. So you can add this either to the clip itself, or you could click up here to the timeline. If all of your footage was raw footage, you could hit Alt-S on the keyboard and make a new node, and you can add a CST to your whole timeline. I'm just going to stick to the clip for now since we have the different styles. So I'm going to take a color space transform, and I'm going to drag that CST onto that node. Then here's where it might get a little controversial, but I just think it looks really good and it works really well. I choose for my input color space Arri wide gamut 3. I know it's not an Arri camera. Stick with me. Then for input gamma, we are going to use Arri Log C3. It will increase the contrast a whole lot. Then our output color space is going to be REC.709. And then I like, and this is just how I like to do it, I like to use Gamma 2.6 instead of Gamma 2.4. I just think it looks better. Then you'll notice that this footage looks a tiny bit dark. So here is where those two exposure methods are important. So if you have matched the exposure, which is what I tend to do, honestly, I don't get so technical with it that I need like every tiny little grain of dynamic range that I can possibly get. I just want an easier viewing experience. So I'm just matching the proper exposure as it looks here, sometimes even using the auto exposure at least to get a baseline. But I'm just matching my exposure from what is in camera and what the camera says that it wants to the CDNG footage that I shoot. So if you matched the exposure, all you have to do is increase your exposure in the raw tab to 1.5 stops. Right there. And then that pretty closely matches the exposure that you would have seen in camera while shooting. And to me, this is my preferred way to at least start with my footage. And then from there, of course, you know, we can adjust our shadows, our color boost if the saturation's too high. You can go from here and edit however you want. But this is how I prefer to at least get to a starting point. And this is the starting point that I went off of from all of my tests and all of my LUTs. But the LUTs are designed to work at the pre-color space transform stage. So you don't have to use this color space transform if you don't want to. Though we can take a look at our LUTs. In the LUT package, I also included a very simple, all that this Sigma DNG plus 1.5 to Arri REC.709, all that is essentially that color space transform that I just did. So if you just wanted to do that same thing I just did without clicking like 5 buttons, you can just drag this LUT onto a node on that DNG footage and it will do that same color space transform. So one handy thing, I can just take, now that I've edited the camera raw tab as well as editing this node, I can click on that clip and I can press Control-C. And then on any of my other DNG clips, I can just press Control-V, paste, and it will paste all of those raw tab settings as well as my node that I just added there. So I'm just going through and I'm clicking on all those DNGs. Now, you'll remember that there is a second way that we can expose our DNG footage, and that is what I'm calling the overexposed method. With that method, instead of doing a 1.5 increase, we just do a 1.5 decrease. And then you'll see, if I go back and forth, the color science gets a little bit different, but right now I'm going back and forth between the matched exposure, which is here, and then the overexposed exposure. So the matched exposure is going up 1.5 stops, and the overexposed one is going down 1.5 stops. Now we are at the starting place, and now I can actually show you the LUTs that this whole thing was made for. So here on the ISO 100 color chart, one of them, which is off to Arri REC.709, that one is the off profile being converted to the CDNG and then adding that color space transform right on top. And then the other one, which is the main one that you came here for, is the off to DNG plus 1.5. So I kind of tried to reiterate that plus 1.5 exposure increase because that's really the one thing that you kind of have to do in the raw tab. So let's just take that and drag it on and apply it. Now you'll remember that I applied a color space transform. So if I just apply that color space transform now, Arri wide gamut 3, Arri Log C3, REC.709, and Gamma 2.6, boom. Now we essentially have, hopefully as close as possible, our off profile, which is this one here right now, to the DNG profile. And again, another thing we can do to take a look at it, we can turn off a node, just kind of mute a node by pressing Control D on the keyboard. And then we can turn off that color space transform. So now there's no color space transforms on either of these. This is our off profile, and this is our DNG as it kind of exists. So we can take a look between those. Again, this is what our off profile started as. Right, there we go. And then this node here is that LUT being applied to that MOV off profile footage. So we can turn those color space transforms back on. Again, you know, it's about as close as I can get it. So I'll just go through these other ones, and all you have to do, and I can even show you the other one on this. So this is the full thing all in one. There we go. This is ISO 800. I noticed it is harder to get it to look good. So like we can talk about what's bad about the MOV, right? I mean, it's like 1/10 of the file size, if not more. And you can see here, like the smoothness in the shadows is very noticeable. Especially in these deep shadows, like the kind of saturation that can be retained in the highlights and the shadows of the DNG is just immense. But, you know, all things considered, especially like from a distance, from a reasonable viewing, this isn't too bad at all. We can take a look at some other ones. Here's just some clouds. Again, I can throw that one on there. This is the raw. This one is the off profile. For this one, we can just do the same thing. There we go. So this is the higher ISO. This one's ISO 800. So this is the under, and this is this is the matched ISO 800, and this is the over ISO 800. And then this is our off profile now with the conversion LUT. So this one is another great example of, you know, the power of the DNG, right? So this is our off profile. It looks pretty good. I mean, I think it looks really good. But if we switch back and forth, zooming into these kind of gravel highlights, look at the level of color that you can see. I mean, it's just insane the amount of color that this can retain. Whereas in here, all of that color information in the highlights is just getting lost. It's kind of similar here in the shadows, right? The shadows are just maintaining more color, obviously more information. And the variety of colors that you can see here in the shadows is really where the off footage starts to fall apart. Another thing to note is that I would perfect a profile, right? Like I'd go onto this one, onto my color checker, and I would just perfect it. It would match perfectly. And then I would export the LUT and I would throw it on a different file in a different scene, and it would completely fall apart and not look the same at all. So then I'd edit that, and I was going back and forth and back and forth. So some of these, I mean, they don't match as perfectly as all the other ones. So like this tree one gave me a crazy amount of time. And what you can see here, what I ended up going for is one, picking the LUT that just matched the best across all the different types of footage. And then if that wasn't working great, I also just decided to err on the side of neutrality in all of the colors. So that, you know, if you wanted, you know, if you really needed to match your off footage to your CDNG footage, I think this LUT will get you into a great place to start doing that. But if you just want your off profile footage to look really good, you could also use these LUTs. It's like this one is another one where you can see a bit of the difference, right? So the big thing here that I notice, it almost feels like the grass is warmer in the CDNG, and you might think you could just go in and make that difference. The real thing that's happening though is that same thing that we looked at with the gravel. The issue is that the off profile is just not able to capture the fine, the kind of fine saturation in the highlights that the DNG footage is. And that's really showing itself here, where we can see that big difference between kind of the warmth and the fineness of that grass. But again, erring on the side of neutrality, I wanted the image to retain the kind of natural neutral look that it had. Here's a really extreme example of dynamic range. So here is a shot of me. This is the CDNG right here. And then here is that same shot in the off profile. One handy tip, if you're working on doing this, if you click on this button up here, I don't even know which one it is. Oh, sorry, this one, split screen. Click on split screen and then do the drop down menu and say selected clips. You can actually, control click on another clip. So the one on the right here is the MOV off profile. And then the one on the left here is the CDNG. So that can be a nice way to compare two different clips that you might be working on. And then this one, finally, it also gave me a crazy time trying to get the highlight colors right. Again, even I would say the CDNG errs on the side of like kind of green here in the highlights. Whereas again, I tried to stick to neutral as much as possible. You can see here also like the level of detail and saturation retained in the shadows on the CDNG is just incredible. Another thing that's really strange about the CDNG, there's this kind of mid-tone contrast in the CDNG footage that is just really hard to replicate in that off profile. So you can see it here in these kind of shadowy areas in this roof. Like it just has this pop to it that I just could not get to transfer into a LUT. If you're a master of doing this kind of stuff, let me know. Another thing you can do, right? Like you can obviously take this off profile footage and do all kinds of stuff to it. Like one thing that doesn't transfer well into a LUT, but works really great, you can just crank the mid detail in the primary's color wheel and get it to get a lot closer to that. All right, so I think that's about it. I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know if you think and try these out. Let me know if you think I got pretty close or if you think they're terrible or if you have suggestions on what to do. Again, if you want to try it yourself, if you all these samples are up there for free, and you could use the LUTs that I already have as a starting point. But I think we give the off profile footage really a bad rap. Like, I think of course it'd be great. We want Sigma to give us LUTs. We want them to give us a real log profile and the conversion LUTs necessary in order to use it. But without them doing that, I think the off profile isn't that bad. Obviously, compared to the CDNG, it's not really close. But after doing all this with all these different LUTs, I am now a lot more on board with recording in 4K all I in the off profile than I would be, going down to 1080p and trying to do upscaling just to shoot it in the CDNG. I think that there is a lot in that off profile that is really good. So anyway, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think. See you later.